Good afternoon. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint, and today's show is going to be on, or it's called, "What If Chickens Could Fly?" Now, I have a couple of people that's joined. My brother Mustafa Ali, my brother in faith, my sister Barbara Jackson, and today's show is "What If Chickens Could Fly?" What would be the ramifications of chickens being able to fly? So, of course, today I don't do the Blueprint to talk about poultry or livestock, but there's an analogy in this show and topic. So what if chickens could fly? That is the question that I'm asking and that I want us to think about. Well, one of the things that would happen if chickens could fly is probably the value of the meat will go up. It will skyrocket. And I'm saying this because it will be harder to maintain chickens. They will be able to fly away. So you would have to put something over the coop or the yard and everything so that they can't fly away. It'll be similar to trying to keep ducks. You actually have to tame the ducks. And of course, with people, when they hunt ducks, a lot of people go out in the wild and hunt ducks. And if you get ducks that's farm raised, the meat doesn't taste as good. But if chickens could fly, then the value of the chicken that we purchase will go up. That's one of the things, the results of if chickens could fly. They will be harder to maintain, therefore their value would increase. They will be more valuable. So I was looking at the reasons that I saw why chickens can't fly. And I heard one biologist say, well, you could tell their feet, they're not made for their talent. They don't have like claws that could grip branches and whatnot. So that's one of the reasons why chickens can't fly. But I scoffed at that because I immediately thought about the duck. The duck have flat feet to walk on the ground. They don't have talons or anything, claws that could grip branches. So the reason that a chicken can't fly has nothing to do with his feet. He is a scratcher and a ground bird, a ground fowl, as they will say. So another reason that I looked up that they say chickens can't fly is they say because they've been genetically altered to not be able to fly. Like they with mankind, they are genetically altered the chicken, which diminished his ability to be able to fly. Now, people that be around chickens, they know that they have a short distance of flight or jumping ability when they flap their wings, but they actually can't soar. But they've been genetically altered from what? And that is the question that I posed then. Like you say, they've been genetically altered. And what I found is that the history of the chicken is they used to be the red jungle fowl, and they've been domesticated. The red jungle fowl was a bird that could fly. Looks exactly like the chicken, but it's been the chicken has been domesticated. And of course, the red jungle fowl at that time was a wild bird, and it roosts in trees and things like that. So this is what I was looking at when I was asking the question, what if chickens could fly? I was looking for a reason why they can't fly. And what happened with the red jungle fowl was about 5,000 years ago in Asia. They domesticated that bird, and ever since he's been domesticated and unable to fly. I mean, you don't want a bird that could fly away. So that's what the history and the ancestry of the modern day chicken today. So the question is, why can't they fly? And I was looking at chickens that they had from 1947 to today's time. Over the decades, they've increased the muscle in the chicken, the breast muscle, the different parts of the chicken to make it more meat on the bones. So, but my question then is, what if they could fly? What if they actually still can fly and they just don't even know that they can fly? Now, y'all bear with me because I am getting to something with this. What if that chick, through imprinting, looking at the hen, and the hen not flying and the rooster not flying, doesn't even know that he's supposed to fly, but he has the ability to fly. He has feathers. He's a bird. What if he could fly, but he just doesn't know that he's supposed to fly? And when they have a mammal that is being taught by a parent and reflects on the abilities of the parent, that's called imprinting when they're young and they're learning. And if you look at birds of flight that can take flight, what happens is those birds, they're in a nest, the young chicks, and they see the mother bird leave the nest to get food and come back and bring them food. And they see the method that that mother bird is taking, which is flight. So they know that I am you and you are me, and we are birds of whatever type of bird it is, an owl, a sparrow, or whatever. They know that eventually that they are supposed to fly by looking at their parents and imprinting that goes on. But with the chick and the chicken, the hen, the chicken isn't learning to fly because his parents is not flying. It down the generations, they don't even know that they're supposed to be able to fly, and that they don't even know that they ever were able to fly. So maybe if they could fly, they wouldn't even fly now because they don't even believe that they have the ability to fly. And I was looking at all these reasons why these biologists was telling me that chickens can't fly, their wings is not strong enough. But what if they don't strengthen their wings to fly because they don't even believe that they need to fly or they're supposed to fly? Now, what the biologists are telling us, you know, they tell us the bumblebee, scientifically, the bumblebee can't fly. His wings is too small for his body. And it's against the laws of aviation for a bumblebee to actually fly, but we see every day bumblebees take flight. So maybe the chicken, if the chicken could fly, he still wouldn't fly because he doesn't know he's supposed to be able to fly. He's not seeing any chickens in flight. That's imprinting. And the same thing, if you correlate that to the human, and this was a question that I posed, I was talking to my daughter earlier, that when a baby is born, a human baby is born, he's a toddler or infant, and all they see is people from the waist up or the chest up because they're laying down on their backs most of the time. And sometimes people will hold them and whatever, but they're not even paying attention to your mode of transportation, of how your motorized skills of getting around. But as that baby becomes more aware of his surrounding and becomes a toddler, starts to identify with people, and he starts to understand, I am you and you are me, I am human, and he sees how humans starts to get around. You place them on the floor, and you know when we have toddlers around, they start crawling. The first thing they do, they start crawling. They try to get around. They see other people getting around. They get around the best they can before they're able to walk. And when they try to get to something and you want to stop them, you get up and walk over there and beat them to that, whatever it is that you're telling them, don't go, don't do that. So they're seeing you use your legs. They're seeing you walk. They just don't have the ability yet, just like that young chick in the nest that knows that his mom could fly, but they don't have the ability yet. But what that chick does in the nest, it strengthens his wings. He practices. He mocks flight. As soon as he gets his plumage, his feathers, he starts to mock flight. He strengthens his wings. He flapping his wings. That baby needs to strengthen his legs to walk. So he'll crawl, then he'll begin to stand. He doesn't have his balance. It's a lot more things, just like a bird. They have to balance in the air and they have to know how to take flight. But what if that chicken is not preparing itself for flight? And that's a key element of what I'm talking about. The chicken is not even preparing itself to fly because he doesn't even know that he used to fly, and he maybe doesn't even know he's supposed to fly. He's a bird. And with the humans, the thing that I posed to my daughter, philosophical question, what if an infant was totally in solitude with just his parents around, not seeing any other humans, and his parents were crippled, couldn't walk? They were in wheelchairs. Would that baby ever take a step or try to walk or know that he's supposed to use his legs to walk? At a certain point, that baby will probably be looking for his wheelchair to mimic or the imprinting that he's getting from his parents, because he never seen anybody use their legs to walk. That was the question that I posed. So what if that was the chicken? If everybody that baby saw was in wheelchairs, then that baby would never even think to use his legs and stand up and take a step, because they haven't seen a human do that. And maybe that's what the problem is with that chicken. But what if they could fly? What if chickens could fly? What if chickens knew their history of the red jungle fowl? How would that change life for us in America as far as the food that we get from the grocery store, the eggs and whatnot, everything? The thing is, the chicken has been domesticated. And that's another word that I'm going to bring back again. Now, the correlation, of course, on the blueprint, we're not talking about chickens and fowl and livestock. We're talking about our community. So the correlation, of course, that I'm bringing with that is with people of color, with Black people, mainly with African origin. Now, and it's actually not even a diaspora Africans, even Africans now in Africa that's been colonized. Because the way that I see us in this world is we've been colonized. We've been domesticated. We've been taken out of the wild. And when I use the term wild, I want you to understand, I don't mean in the connotations of the word that means like savages and whatnot. I mean, when I say wild, I mean free. Because wild means free of domestication and being tamed by man. And when here in America, the Blacks, the Africans in here in America, we've been domesticated by a system. We've been domesticated to depend on the system. An animal that's been domesticated is dependent on humans at that point, generation after generation. They're dependent on humans for things that they need to function. And we in America and colonialized Africa are dependent on systems to survive. We are not free of that system. Therefore, we are no longer wild and free. What I mean when I say wild, understand, I'm saying free. A wolf in the wild, they're social animals. They live in a social society. A pride of lions, they live in a social environment. So I'm not talking about society. We had societies way before anyone else on this planet. The first societies, the first cultures was in Africa, derivative in the motherland. So when I'm saying wild, just keep that in mind. I'm talking free, because you could take a lion out of the wild and tame that lion and put him in the circus, and he becomes dependent on man for everything that he needs. He's no longer thinking in the same aspect as he thought of in the wild. He's still a wild animal, but he's not being domesticated. He's actually being tamed. But here in America, we are being domesticated. We have been domesticated by a system. And that's how I'm using the two domestications: the domestication of the red jungle fowl or chicken, and the domestication of us as people. Now, the domestication of the livestock is being dependent on man. The domestication of the African in America and abroad in the motherland, they're being dependent on society, the European-based society. So if we look at what has happened around the world in our history and in present day, you will see glimpses of what I'm talking about. Because the things, if we look at our history, language came from Africa. Writing, the alphabet came from Africa. Language, writing, and history, historical documents being kept, came from Africa. Universities came from Africa. Math came from Africa. The first mathematical instrument they found was a hip bone or a thigh bone of a baboon. millions of years ago that had carvings on it, markings of it, like they were keeping it to count. It had 1 mark, then it had 2 marks, then it had 3 marks, then it had 4 marks. So they knew that 2 was actually 2 times 1. Or if they wanted 3, they needed the 1 and the 2 together, then they put 3 marks. So they was actually using something to count or to calculate. And that was millions of years ago. Now, the thing is, when we talk about Africa, as far as from a European sense, they call Africa the dark continent. But not because Africa was in darkness, it's because Europe was in darkness and had no knowledge of Africa being there because they hadn't traveled. And they had to go through their dark ages in themselves and then find that Africa existed and that there were people there. Now, the Greeks found out, Herodotus and things like that. They knew of the Africans, Northern Africans and things like that. But I'm talking about the Europeans after the fall of the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. Europe had to go through dark ages. They were in darkness. And if you look at genealogically or chronologically what's been happening throughout Europe and Africa, you'll see that Africa was way more advanced. The first mining of metals was in Africa. Like I said, the first universities, the first spoken language, the first tools being used, the mechanized tools, everything civilization was started in Africa. And if you look at the timeline side by side, like I say, Europe was in darkness. So what you have to understand is I'm not talking about when somebody that was uncivilized try to tell you that they found you uncivilized when you had civilizations that go back 5,000 years, 4,000 years. But their civilizations don't go nearly back that far. They actually gained civilization from us. And you had people that were doing things that made them uncivilized try to tell you that we were uncivilized. They try to have people that was uncivilized teach us how to be civilized. So we don't want to confuse civilization and the word being civilized. Now, if we look at what I'm saying as far as being domesticated, colonized, and whatnot, if you look at all the things that we have done here in this country, and I'm not going to go back. Every time we go back to Black History Month, we talk about all the incredible inventions that we didn't know that Black people made and had that we didn't get patents for. And at that time, when we were doing a lot of these things, we couldn't have patents. So I don't even want to go into the early things, but I'm talking about modern day things when we could have patents. And this is what a domesticated animal does. A domesticated animal doesn't do things on its own accord. It does things for the person who domesticated them. Livestock do things for humans. Humans have them there for a reason, and everything that livestock does, whether it's plow the land or for riding purposes or whatever, they doing it for who domesticated them. And we are domesticated by a system. I'm not talking about by humans. We're domesticated by a system. And the proof of that is things that's modern day things that we've invented that many of us had no ideas about, we've done for the system because we're not wealthy in any accord by any of these families that have invented these things that we use. When we talk about Mr. Lattimore, I believe that was his name, that had the technology for the incandescent light, the lights that we actually use, that he was a pioneer of Edison, and many claim that he probably the one that invented the light bulb, but he couldn't get a patent for it. But he did come up with the technology that we use today for the light bulb. But his name is not in any university or in any products that we buy. When we look at Marie Van Brittan Brown, she was a African-American sister born in New York, Jamaica, New York, Queens. And She was an inventor, and she invented the home security system in the 1960s. She was the inventor of the home security system in the 1960s. But I don't see any brown security systems on the market. Many of us go to ADT or whatever to get car, even, I mean, the technology that they use for home security is the same thing they use for vehicles. For the car alarm, you break the circuit and the alarm goes off. You break the circuit in the home, you open the door, same thing like in your car. Now, how many of us have car alarms? How many of us have burglar alarms? How many businesses have burglar alarms? You would think that name, Brown, would be a name of wealth. How many things over the world, how many countries over the world use alarm systems? But she did something, and it was used by the system, and she got no credit. She got no wealth for it. They're crediting her with the technology. When we talk about Otis Boykin, who did the control unit for the pacemaker, and when he was an infant, his mother died, I believe, within a year of him being born, and that inspired him. She died from some kind of heart ailment, and that inspired him to come up with something that would help those people in that situation. And he came up with the control unit for the pacemaker. But that name doesn't ring a bell. Lonnie Johnson, Dr. Mark Dean. Dr. Mark Dean, he was a co-creator of the PC unit, personal computer, with IBM. He's one of the co-creators of the PC, the personal computer, that many of us go to work and use every day, that many of us use in our homes every day. But I'm not seeing Dean computers. I don't see any kind of firms or corporations, the Dean corporations, like I see Kellogg and Ford. People, the Europeans that have invented things or come up with things or said they invented things, their families became wealthy, and they're still around today. We talked about Dr. James West. This was the inventor of the microphone. I'm talking on an electric microphone. He was the inventor of an electric microphone. But I don't see a West Communications or any microphones that I could go buy. I see, like, I could go to Sony and all these things like that, AudioVox and all these places to get microphones, but I don't see a West microphone that I could purchase. And everything, what I'm getting at is everything that we're doing in this society, we're doing for that society and not for ourselves. When we used to be the ones that started astronomy, started noticing the celestial bodies, that came out of Africa. We were the first ones charting and mapping the stars, and the first ones realizing how the moon and the sun and everything that was behind the moon. We knew the stars were behind the moon because we actually paid attention to what was happening to our surroundings. The same moon and sun and stars was in Europe. They were able to see the same thing, but nothing was coming out of Europe about astronomy. So much for like the calendars that we mark our years with and everything like that. When everybody sits up here and they talk about zodiac signs, that came out of Africa. We were a people that was at flight. We were people that was soaring. We were people that was at the pinnacle of inventing things that help all of this world, all of mankind. But now we're relegated to be like chickens on the ground, scratching and scratching that dirt. And only time we may fly a small amount. Now, some of these people with their inventions, these are maybe minor inventions. It's like that chicken taking flight, like flapping his wings and jumping for a little bit of height, but they're not soaring. But what if chickens could fly? What if chickens knew where they came from? If they knew that they came from the red jungle fowl, and that red jungle fowl can take flight. And I look at the advancements that we made when given a chance in this country. We got Percy Levine Julian that came up with, he extracted and developed the drugs that's used to treat glaucoma, testosterone and steroids, fertility drugs. But I don't see any institutions or hospitals named after Percy Julian. I don't see any of that. He did his advancements for this society, and he got no real wealth out of that. It was supposed to be a capitalistic society driven by capitalism. So when you invent something or you create something, you get compensated for it and you get rich and wealthy, and your family is wealthy for generations. But we're like livestock. The mules, the donkeys, they do the work. The oxen, they do the work on the farm and the ranches. The chickens, they provide the food and the eggs. But we never buy chickens named after any, we never buy eggs named after any chicken. We get it from the producers, the poultry companies. Livestock work for those that own them. And we are in a system that owns us, that keeps us grounded, that have genetically altered our mind and our thinking. And we have like Jerry Lawson. This is the reason that we could play video games. You know, a lot of people, the video games in your home is a big thing, but he created the ROM, the read-only memory, to where you could take a game cartridge. He invented that, a black person. But I don't see any of the, I see Sony and I see PlayStation. I don't see anything named after Jerry Lawson. He did what he did and it worked for the system. And his family isn't wealthy like the Fords and the Rockefellers and the Kellogg's. And if we look at all the things that we did when we were wild, when we were free thinkers, when people try to tell us that they did the things or take credit for the things that we have created, but then they turn around and they scoff at Christopher Columbus taking credit for discovering the new world, knowing that it was people already there and people that traveled before him. But when people ask you, most of us have a drink of coffee in the morning. And then we have others that want to take credit for where coffee came from. I was looking at a video and they was telling me some Yemen or something like that, some people invented coffee when they got that coffee from Ethiopia. You know, you can't take something that someone was already doing or something that someone was already using, something that someone had already invented, and because you take it and make it popular, take credit for that and thing. So Kaldi, a Sufi and Ethiopian goat herder, he is credited with the first person to come up with using the coffee bean, because his goats was eating the coffee beans and getting energetic. And they started in Ethiopia, boiling the beans to get the juice out of the beans and drinking the juice. Others found out about it and took that back home to them. And now we want to give credit to them for things that we developed. So anytime you have someone that drinks a cup of coffee, understand where that came from. It didn't come from Brazil. It didn't come from any people of a certain religious background. It came from the motherland. And we have people that take credit for algebra. I hear two different fathers of algebra. And then what happens when we have a person, they say, well, algebra is an Islamic name or Arabic name, but they want to give them credit. And I seen a video where somebody keeps posting that says that they came up with algebra, and that's not so. Who they said came up with algebra, who they want to call the father of algebra, was around in 1850s AD. When you have Africans using algebra, trigonometry, and geometry in 3000 BC, over 2,000 years before that, built civilizations off of those mathematics. But then you have to credit one person. And so they want to credit, one is a Arab dude and one is a Greek mathematician. Both of them had legs on being the father of algebra, because they expounded on something that was already there. You can't let anyone tell you that you are not the creators of everything that's before us as a people. Mostly everything that is before us is derivative off of the mathematics. You can't have any electronics off without mathematics, geometry, trigonometry, algebra. You can't build anything without the mathematics. I had a guy that was on social media, and he made a comment about it was a racial undertone about, and he, whatever it was about, he made a comment about, well, like, black people have contributed nothing. And he made a comment about peanut butter and the cotton gin. Okay, we could live without peanut butter and the cotton gin. And I'm looking at a stream of people going back and forth with this dude, but they didn't even have any kind of knowledge of retort of coming back on him for making these comments. So I chimed in, and I didn't say anything. I didn't use any foul language or anything. I just started hitting him with facts, and I got reported to Facebook for that. And I couldn't even respond on the post anymore because I told him, I will make you look stupid with that rhetoric. And that was probably the strongest thing I said. Other than that, I was hitting him with facts of our history, of what our history in America, our history in Africa, and what we brought to the world. And he sat there and he was unable to reply, and then he reported me. But I'm looking at the stream of people that was going at it back and forth with him, that none of them had the wherewithal to know their own history. They would say things like, well, we did more than just peanut butter. We did the dustpan, you know. But if chickens could fly, if they knew where they came from, they could take flight. I was reading a book by David Popenow, a philosophy book. It had all these philosophers in it and their teachings and theories and whatnot. And he spoke one part of that. He was talking about a branch of philosophy of how mankind domesticates the chicken or domesticates animal and has a conscience about the animals that they domesticate. But they frown on nature and they say nature is cruel. But I read a passage where Popenow said, what is more cruel but to raise a chicken, an animal, out of the egg at birth, feed it, comfort it, give it shelter, gain its trust. Every time he sees you, he thinks it's time to eat. He thinks that you will protect him. When a fox breaks into a chicken coop, the chickens will make noises, and the farmer will run out with his gun and kill the fox or whatever is in the chicken coop. They start trusting you for protection, trusting you to eat. And he said, we think that nature is cruel because a fox chases a chicken or a bird and sometimes captures it and kills it. And we think that that's cruel. And the fox is the villain. But that's just nature. The fox has to eat. But he said, how cruel is it to raise an animal from the time it is born, to shelter it, give it food, shelter, and protection, and one day wring his neck. And I thought about here, us being domesticated in this system, believing in this system, believing that this system will protect us, believing that this system provides for us, when this system is genetically altering us to not think and not soar, to be like chickens. We believe in voting in this system and thinking that will cure everything. We believe everything in this system. We cry out when the system murders our children in the streets. And the system don't give us any justice, but we still believe in the system. We believe that this system is supposed to protect us like chickens. When chickens notice what is happening to the other chickens, they believe in the ones that domesticated them. And we have become like chickens in this society. We are domesticated by this society, dependent on this society that is not protecting us. But what if chickens could fly? What if we could take flight? Now, last week I brought up Lao Tzu and the Tai Chi Ching, and I said that it was 2 verses that I memorized from him. The second verse, when I think about the second verse, I think about us and our problems here in society, the society that I'm speaking of, the society that's domesticating us, that's using us, that's genetically altering our mindsets to not fly and to depend on us. He said, what is forever? He said, what is forever flowing, forever yielding, can overwhelm what is forever hard. Being without form and substance, it could go where there's no space. He said, this is how I know the action of the actionless, that there can be teaching without words. The action of the actionless has value, but only few can understand. Now, if I break down what that meant, and when I'm gonna tell y'all what that means to me, when he said, what is forever yielding, what actually was happening, he was sitting at a side of a brook, a water, a little small river, where the water was gushing, and he was looking at the water and the bricks. And what he said was forever yielding, he got that off of the water. And he said it can overwhelm what is forever hard, meaning the stones or the that was in the river at the brook. He said, being without form, it can go where there's no space. Now, if you think about that, being without form, water can go where it wants to go, around things, gets into the cracks and crevices, and even dislodged a brick or a rock or a wall if it has cracks in it. And he says, this is how I know action, the value of the actionless. And what is action of actionless? That means you don't have to do something. You don't have to come at something a certain way to oppose it, to defeat it. The action of the actionless means that you don't have to actually have action that you could see. You could use your brain to defeat and overcome the deficiencies that come before you in this society. He said, this is how I know teaching without words. Now, how do you teach without words? How do you teach someone without telling them how to do something? How do you teach someone without them reading the words on how to do something? You do that by example. He said, this is how I know the value of teaching without words. That means you are teaching them and they're using their eyes and their minds to see what is happening and what is going on. And he said that that gives value to the action of the actionless, but only few can understand. Now, that what I took from that passage is what I take when I think about our issues here in America. You can't fight force with force sometimes. You have to use your brain. You have to use your knowledge. You have to use history. Then you have to teach without words. Sometimes the action of the actionless is not going out and trying to combat the police force with guns when you would lose that battle. Trying to combat the system that has an army, the most powerful army in the world. You can't win that. But you have to use actionless action. You have to teach without words. And now when I say now, when teaching without words, because see, when you teach someone, sometimes people want to put everything of their business on social media and say, this is how we got to do this. And this is how we got to attack these people, and this is how we attack the system. And then it's like you thinking the system is not seeing that. People that's loving the system is not seeing that and seeing what you're talking about. They have a book that's called The 48 Laws of Power, and that's telling you how that was the #1 selling book, and that's telling you how corporations think. But you can't tell someone what you're going to do and then think that what you're going to do is going to work. You have to have action of the action list. You have to use our minds. We have to do something. We have to soar again, prepare ourselves and soar again like a red jungle fowl and not be domesticated by the system. And this is how you can have teaching without words. You lead by example. But that's only if chickens can fly. And I'd like to thank some of y'all that came out today. Desiree and Aisha Ray and Chris Minor and Jesse X. Hadun. My daughter Leah tuned in. And I can't even go up on some of the names. Albert Hill, Sheila, Rogers, Taylor, and Elvin. And I appreciate y'all for showing up, Didi and my cousin Vince and Mustafa Ali. And I'm going to cut this show short this week. But that was the topic. We had teaching from Lao Tzu, and we also had commentating and from David Papineau, his philosophy. And I want to give those people credits because they help sharpen the mind. They teach without words. But that's the show for this week. And I'd like to thank y'all for showing up. And hopefully we'll have a better show next week. Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint.